Good morning. I just realized I lost my plate, but I remember it's in the microwave. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our third CEO with Sylvia Washington. She is the president and CEO of Tresco Incorporated. And we kind of developed this concept based on our female professionals, on ways that she can tell her story or her experiences, her wins and losses, things that she would have done differently, things that she's learned as she climbed the corporate ladder at Tresco, because she did start with them, and she is, I always get it mixed up if it's 16 or 18.
17 years.
He's somewhere in between. Yeah, how long we've known each other now. But started with them 17 years ago and has now reached the pinnacle of their corporation or nonprofit corporation. So we take topic suggestions from you guys, and then sometimes we come up with them on our own, or sometimes she points out me and Stacy and says, this is what you guys need help with. And so we're going to talk about it. So actually the other day, and I told her, I was like, it's kind of personal, but I appreciate it. I was a solopreneur for 10 years. Tried to have assistants, tried to have people work with me, but nobody worked quite to the same caliber that I did. And I also was not a great delegator in the sense of, I was like, I can just do it and save time. So she's talking today about decision-making and delegating. And I'm super excited to hear some tips and tricks on that, because I am terrible at asking for help. If anything else, I just say, hey, can I get that for you? And I'll just do it. So with that, please take it away, Miss Sylvia.
Good morning. Yes, Summer, you are correct. And I guess that's the first part to talk about. And I think that's where I think both you and Stacy are at is, and I've been with Tresco for 17 years, and I've had different positions and different management positions and different expectations, liabilities, responsibilities. No one is ever going to do it like you do, ever. That's not the point. The point is that you can't do everything. That's the point. And so you have to figure out what things are better to be delegated out than for you to continue doing them. But yeah, if you're looking for yourself in somebody, in an assistant, in somebody working for you, you are going to be harshly disappointed, because nobody is going to do stuff like you are. So I was actually reading an article in preparation for having this discussion. And so there's the Pareto's principle. I think I'm saying that right. And it's the 80-20 rule. And so the idea is that 80% of what we do is very low value in the scheme of things of what we need to get done and what we need to be doing. And 20% of what we do makes a difference in the business growth trajectory, which I think I think we can say that for a lot of different avenues of our life is the 80-20 rule, and how much of it is actually the stuff that we need to be doing and how much is it stuff that we probably don't need to be doing. But in looking at that, I think the first thing is to really figure out the value of your time and the priorities. What are the priorities? And so if you look at your workload, if you look at your list of things that you're doing on a regular basis, or feeling like you're not getting done on a regular basis, that you have a priority list of there's A-level priorities, B, C, D type thing, lower down the list. And the first thing is for you to look at the priorities, and the D-level type things should be immediately delegated out. They're not for you at all whatsoever. And then you look at your B's and C type priorities and see if those are also things that should be delegated out as well. So that way you're really left with the A priorities of your job, and those are the things that you're doing. And then you're delegating out those other lower level priorities. I think the only caveat to that, the one exception, is that you've got to keep the stuff that you love. And then the article that I was reading, the example was that they could delegate the graphic design for their business, but that was something that they liked, working with the graphic designer on those ideas, so that's something that they kept. And that's true to form for me as well. As being the CEO of Tresco, we have an events committee that's in charge of putting together company picnics and special little activities and food truck Friday and things like that. So really and truly, it's probably not a committee at this point that I should be a part of, but it's something that I enjoy and I love and I have fun doing. And so I continue to help in that committee whenever I can. So that's probably the one exception to think of. So really, in a nutshell, when you're looking at delegation, you've got to figure out your priorities. You've got to figure out which things are absolutely not a priority, not part of what your job and what you should be doing. And then those are the things that you've got to work on delegating out. And then like I said, the one exception is the things that you love that brings you to work every day. Those are the things that you've got to keep some of those, because that just keeps you inspired and passionate about what you do. And so that's the important part. But to dive into like, how do you delegate?
I have a question. Sorry,
Mhm.
I have a question. For those of us that aren't in traditional corporate roles and
Mhm.
perhaps don't have a job description. So should we just take the, carve out some time, make a list of all the things that we do in order to run our business day to day? Like, I have to make this many phone calls. I have to spend time doing my schedule. I have to book this many meetings. I have to have this many clients. I have to go to the, send out mailers. I have to do all this stuff. So just make a list and then prioritize them into columns or something.
Correct. And your lower level things that are really not for you to be doing are the things to delegate out. And it's not even, I hate to say the things you shouldn't be doing, but it might even be the things that are taking away from the things
actual income
you need to be doing. Yes. And so when it's taking away from that, and you're running at the end of the day and you don't have time to do those things that are the most important, that's when you've got it. That's when you have an issue of needing to delegate things out.
I will say, as someone who's been in that realm for so long, I will tell you, I always ranked meetings with new clients, meetings with closing clients above anything else. Closings were when people were writing checks. Intro meetings were people who were going to be writing checks, and anything in between was what I had trouble letting go of, but it still had to be done, but I could utilize somebody else. And then where we are in time, that may be like utilizing like a virtual assistant, an intern, someone part-time. Anyway, so with that, I will be quiet. I just wanted to let you know, if you don't work in a corporation where you're like, just have Sally do it. That may be how we have to figure it out.
And then, along the lines of the professional world, the professional realm, where there is even a small business that's owned, has other employees, the solopreneurs, yeah, that's a little bit different. You're going to have to be very creative on how you're going to delegate. But even small businesses have other employees, other people that work with you. And the how to, and I think that's the big piece before we got started that, Stacy was bringing up, is how do you do that delegation piece? And the bottom line was, like I said at the beginning, nobody's ever going to do it like you, but you can't do everything. So you got to figure out what things you need to pass on. And then that priority level, that helps to figure out what the priorities are. Like Summer was saying, what makes me money? What doesn't make me money? What are my jobs that I'm responsible for, that I'm held, to the responsibility of doing, and what things I'm not. And those are the things that then you've got to delegate. The how to do it is that you've got to teach the person how to do it. And that's the part that I think that's where everybody stops, because it's painful to teach somebody else how to do something that you know how to do in 5 seconds. But the bottom line is, again, much like we were just talking about working out this morning, it's not the short-term effect that we're getting. That's not the short-term that we're looking for. It's the long-term, that eventually you're not going to be having to take care of this activity, job, task, day in and day out, if you're taking the time up front to train about it, to teach somebody how to do it, and then move it off your plate onto somebody else's plate. And so, yes, it's grueling at the beginning and frustrating at the beginning, but again, you're looking for long-term. And if you're not wanting to have to take up time to do this activity, then you're going to have to take that time up front, teach somebody how to do it, and move it off your plate. And that's the bottom line. And yes, it is painful. And yes, it is having to shadow. And yes, it is having to answer the same question a couple times, or re-explain a couple times, but bottom line, again, long-term, you're wanting this off your plate. So you've got to take that time at the front end to get that done.
And if you want it done close to the way that you were doing it as possible, spend the extra couple times, the extra couple hours, and make sure, just be like, I don't mean to reiterate, or I don't mean to be too tedious, but this is the, these are the steps, because I suck at that. I'm not an overly patient person. But I also have ridiculous expectations. I'm a female. So
see, and I've had to let go of that. Like I'm a type A personality, and nobody does anything better than I do anything. I mean, I totally feel that way, but I've had to let that go, because the alternative was then I was going to do everything. And so I had to let that go within myself and say, you're either not going to trust anybody and you're going to do everything, or you're going to have to trust. One of the things I had to let go was, there's all kinds of ways to get from A to Z, and it may not be the way I would do it, but if the goal is still happening and the person gets to Z, I got to let that go, because otherwise I'm going to make myself crazy worrying about, well, you didn't do it this way, and you didn't do that, and you didn't do this first, and you didn't then. I had to let that go. I had to, there's a lot of things that I would turn around and say, okay, you want to do it this way, you do it this way, it's your baby. And people would kind of be like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, I'm letting go of the reins. I'm letting you figure out how you're going to get there. Ultimately, we have to get here though. Go for it. And so it was, I was saying it both ways. I was saying that I was letting go, but I was also saying, I'm letting go, so don't screw this up. Take this on. You really want to say, I think I can figure out a better way to do it. Okay, well then show me, do it, because otherwise you're going to do it my way. And so, I mean, that's the other piece with delegation also. If people have different ideas, or they come with their creative juices and say, well, hey, what about, and I think we could do it this way, and what if we just did it that way? I do have to be open to those things. And I have to say, okay, I'll let you try it, but if it doesn't work, then we're coming back to my way. And it's just all of that give and take and compromise and figuring it out.
Well, I was going to say that's such a smart, kind of like a prolific way to look at it, because if you say, because obviously, yes, we like the way we do things, but we're not always the smartest person in the room. We admit that we're not. So being like, you know what, maybe I can learn something from this. I'll tell you, like, you guys and Trisha have taught me tons of things that I was like, oh, you're right, that is easier than the way I was doing it. So maybe coming in with that mindset would help with the fact that it's not like I'm handing this off, but I'm also granting creative control or creative input on an easier way to do it. We did have somebody, Cameron said, I'm not the only one who feels this way. Y'all are making me feel better.
Well, yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the hard part is I think we all get bogged down in that. And again, in different avenues of our life, that we think we're the only one that thinks this way, or we're the only one that goes through this. We're the only one that this happens, that you try to teach somebody something and they screw it up and you have to take it back anyway. And that was a mistake. It happens with everybody. But the bottom line, and I think Summer said it very, very graciously, the patience piece is huge. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to have patience, and the 20 questions that are going to come back to you and you think they're stupid, and you're like, at this point, can't you just figure it out? And yes and no, and yeah, that sounds good, or I don't care. I mean, that all takes patience. But again, like I said, you've got to be with the goal in mind, just like with anything else that you have a goal of. It's the long-term goal, not the short-term. It's the long-term, not the short-term, because that's hard. That's the hard part. And so you get frustrated in the short-term and say, forget it, give it back to me, I'll just do it. But then you're not meeting the long-term goal, which was for that activity to be off of your plate and onto somebody else's plate.
That was
Hey,
a very
Sylvia.
profound statement.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hey, I think
Jumping
it
in.
also, I mean, delegation is hard and that patience is hard. But it is also, and it can be rewarding when you see that person grow, when they do meet that goal that you set for them. And so I mean,
Yes.
that there is a rewarding feeling to delegate when you see a coworker grow because they're outside their wheelhouse or they're learning a new skill and they take ownership of it. It's still hard. I want to celebrate, but it is rewarding.
It is. And so some of the things that I've done, my tips and tricks of delegation over the years, is I have to ask myself a lot of reflective questions. One of the ones I always ask is, am I in the weeds? Like if I'm too much in the weeds and I'm involved in something that I should not be involved in, and you know, this is really talking when you're in the leadership roles, that's where I really have to take a step back and be like, I'm too involved in this process. I need to step out. Another thing is, am I micromanaging? Am I micromanaging a process that I shouldn't be micromanaging? That's another piece that I ask myself a lot, that if I'm not allowing this person to grow as an employee or a supervisor or whatever their job is, then I'm hindering the process. And so that's another question I ask a lot of times when I'm thinking about an activity or something that needs to be delegated or may not be appropriate for me to continue to take care of. Another one that is not so nice and not so lovey, but it is something that I have to ask is, if I'm doing this job, whatever it is, then why do I need this person if that's that person's job? And that's a huge one, because I'm like, why am I doing this? Because if I'm doing it, then that means I don't need you and I could save money and I could have your salary if that's the case, if I'm going to continue doing this work. And so that's always a hard question for myself, that I have to reel myself back in and go, all right, I should not be doing this. And we did hire somebody to do this. And so this is this person's job, and this person needs to be given the training, the guidance and the mentorship, so that way they can do the job. For supervisors, when I work with supervisors, a lot of the times the questions that I have them ask, of course, those same questions of themselves. But if this is an essential duty of that person's job, you know, if filing is for the admin, but somehow you're picking up and you're doing the filing, then, you know, why? And what is now being put on the back burner that you're supposed to be doing because you've taken on somebody else's task that they need to be doing. So it's that domino effect of how is this going to affect everything? So that's one question I have. I always ask supervisors. Also, are we allowing supervisors to do are we allowing the staff to do their job? That's another question I ask supervisors. Are you letting them do their job? Like they have a job to do, or are you holding on to it? And so those are some questions that I ask of supervisors when I'm talking to them about delegation. I think the last one that often comes up too, that needs to be talked about, is to think of the job, think of the task, think of the job description, or think of the job title, not the person. And that's hard for people, because we get to know our staff, we get to know our employees, we get to know their strengths and their weaknesses. And so it's really easy to be thinking about something, thinking about a task and going, oh, but Susie is terrible at Excel, so we can't have her do that because she's bad at Excel. Okay, no, hold on. What's Susie's job? Is her job to be working on the computer? Is her job to be using Excel? Is her job to be doing whatever? If all the answers are yes of that job, then it doesn't matter that Susie is bad at that. It's that we need to put the time, the effort, the energy to make Susie better at that. Or Susie may not be in the right job. And that's always those hard questions also. Because a lot of times when we start to take on stuff and pile stuff onto us, it's because we're taking over for the shortcomings of other people. And we need to not do that. We need to actually train them up. We need to coach them up to where they're supposed to be at, not go, oh, okay, well, you're not good at doing that, so I'll just go ahead and I'll do that instead. That's also not a way. That's just going to pile on the work onto you.
questions, but I can't. There's a new thing that if I touch my own picture, and it asks me if I want to change my background like 7 times. So based on what you just said, which all excellent points, like I said, as someone who has struggled with this myself, so 2 questions, or I'll do one at a time. So how do you make the process as easy as possible? Because like, for example, you know, what I've been working on is trying to make this cookbook for Trisha, and it is a nightmare. But I have figured out that if I break it into like smaller pieces, or if I make notes as I'm doing some things, because so much of it lives in your head. But any tips on how to make the delegation part easier for both parties?
So when you say both parties, are you talking about you and Trish?
I'm talking about for the delegator and the receiver of the delegatee.
So I think a lot of times for me, where I start and what you're talking about is something that's being created from the ground up, that doesn't have a cookbook already, doesn't already have a job description, doesn't already have whatever created. It's to sit down and have a mutual understanding of what the goal is. What is the goal of what I'm about to delegate to you? Because if the person that's about to receive a project from you, and we're building the project as we go, it's trial and error, they need to understand at least what the overall goal is. What are we trying to accomplish at the end? Because if we're building it as we go, then there isn't a recipe, there isn't a cookbook, there isn't anything to follow. We're creating, so I at least need to know what I'm supposed to get to. And so that's probably the important part, is what am I supposed to, at the end, what's the goal? What am I supposed to accomplish when you hand me over?
What we're saying is we hate creative delegation. Got
it. It's hard. That's the problem. The problem is it's hard when you're starting something from scratch with somebody else, because first and foremost, the person has to understand what they're about to embark on with you. They have to understand what the goal is, what the end result expectation is.
Okay. And then one more, how would one approach a supervisor if they have inadvertently taken something off of somebody else's plate? Like, because that was delegated to them and then they ended up with it or whatever. Again, because I've been out of corporate for so long. So how would somebody say, like, hey, I've taken this on because so-and-so wasn't able to do it or wasn't doing it. And perhaps our job descriptions need to be reevaluated.
So you're saying from the point of view of the person that took on a task that's maybe not their task, how to bring that up to the supervisor? I think it's just saying that. I mean, exactly what you said. I ended up taking this on because so-and-so wasn't good at it, or it wasn't getting done, or I like doing it. I saw that it was something that we needed to get done. Because yes, then it does need to be like, okay, well, we've identified, maybe we had the cashier's job was to do this, but we're finding that the hostess was better at doing this, for a different example, or an admin versus a, specialist or an HR person. It just kind of varies. Like maybe that wasn't the right job task for that job. If number one, it was never getting done, or number two, it didn't fit well. Like the biggest thing though is just always keeping in mind, if you're creating and you're moving stuff around for an individual, you can get yourself in trouble there. You really want to be focused on, when you're looking at tasks, about the job at hand. And sometimes, even though a different person took on that task, you may still determine, well, no, that's supposed to be an admin job, so we've got to get it back to the admin. You may still identify that, or you may identify, all right, it wasn't working as an admin task, we're going to take it off of being an admin task and it's going to be this job's task, but not Susie versus Timmy versus Sylvia, not that, because that's where you get in trouble, because then you're looking at personalities and you're looking at And then when these people move on, you have these job descriptions that are built, or job tasks or job expectations that are built for an individual. And that's not going to help you at all.
Okay. So I would imagine we have a lot of questions and or comments on this topic, which is perfect because we still have about 30 minutes to deal with it. So I'm going to open the floor up. If you guys have specifics, or if you have hacks, if you have experience, y'all know we keep it conversational. So everyone in here is a master delegator. So no one has any.
So you should have
Like
tips and
how-
tricks to share.
Yeah. Do you still have some?
Me, myself?
Do you have? Yeah. Do you have tips and tricks?
Really, it's just asking a lot of those questions, willing to do the training.
Yeah.
And the guiding and the mentorship. A lot of times what I always tell people when they're going to hand over a task to somebody is I'm like, you have to teach them what the task is. Then they watch you do the task. So, for instance, a big thing here at Tresco is when somebody is it hired on as a new supervisor or gets promoted to become a supervisor, we have disciplinary documents that you have to know how to do, when to do them, what are the right opportunities, how to run the meeting, how to write the disciplinary document, the whole thing. It's not a one and done easy process. And so in that aspect, it's training them on the documents, what the different documents are, what we use those different documents for. Then it's when you actually have to do one, you have the supervisor, you go through the process and you write the disciplinary document, you have the meeting, and they're shadowing the process. Then you flip it, and the next time it's they're writing the document, they're hosting the meeting, but you're shadowing them, because then that way you can give them that constructive feedback to say, hey, you forgot about this, or you didn't mention this, or you didn't write this in the document. And then by the third time, they're able to go out on their own. But of course, they can always come back and ask questions or ask for guidance, or, even role play before they're going to go and have the meeting. But that's always my expectation, is you train first, then you show them you doing it, then you watch them do it. So that way, then you can still give that feedback, and then they're on their own, so to speak.
I think the hardest part of it is taking the time to do it. Because that's always been my downfall. I also tend to speed through things. So, but yeah, just taking the time to really break it down. I will agree with you, because when I did work corporate and I worked in their office, and it was very, very process driven. That's what we did. It was, here's your job description, expectations, responsibilities. You shadowed somebody for a couple of weeks, then you executed while they watched you, and then you were left, by yourself and then checked in on. But yes, it is so much easier, I think, when those processes already exist. When you're doing double duty with a new business, or as a solopreneur, or if you're scaling or anything like that, where you're kind of I love the term that you just came up with, that word, creative delegation. I'm like, that could be an entire, just have to find the solutions. We're going to have to be like, this is what a virtual assistant does. This is what an intern can do. Here's what a temporary person. Temps are also, I feel like this day and age, underrated. Like if you just need somebody for a short stint to do like a project coordination of like, hey, we're doing this project right now. We need some more manpower. I'm just really surprised. Miss Debbie, are you in here? Because I have a feel. I mean, I can't imagine you not having some information.
There. Good morning.
Good morning,
Morning.
Debbie.
Yeah,
If y'all don't know, If y'all don't know Miss Debbie Moore, she has graced us with her presence this morning. She is the president of the Greater Las Cruces Chamber of Commerce and a personal friend of all of ours. Thank you for being here, honey.
Well, thank you. I actually sent Taylor to do the radio so I could be on today because I've been wanting to hop on. And so I just echo everything you said, Sylvia. I think one thing I've learned in my 40+ career, and I work a lot with volunteers, as many of you all do, is between staff and volunteers is after the training, everyone needs a process, but we as leaders and we as mentors have to be willing to be there to pick up the pieces, so to speak, but to guide them through the process when quote unquote a mistake is happened. I will say, I think, Sylvia, you mentioned it a while ago in some of your comments, is that I know I too feel like I know the best way. And Stacy's been in my office, she knows how I kind of work, but I've learned through my career that sometimes it's not how you get there, it's the fact that you get there and you get there with a team. And so, we all I remember when I first came to Las Cruces, and Senator Carrie Hamlin, she and I had a conversation. And the crux of it is we all want a better community. We all want a better business. We all want something that's better, but we may not all go the same way, but we get there together. And I think as we guide our professional career and our personal career and all of that, that's an important thing to realize. And I've had to let go of that, is that, my way to me is the right way. There are some things that there's no compromise on. But also I've learned a lot, and you have to be open as a leader. And so I'm sure in your work that you have several generations, and I have even 2, 3, including myself at the chamber. So I think one thing I've learned is when the millennials, there was all this talk about millennials, I to myself thought, I'm going to learn something from them because it's creative ways. So I think you have to be flexible. I love the term creative delegation. I too was thinking of things, but I think you have to be committed to the process. You have to be willing to pick up the pieces, but you also have to be willing, if you're alive, you need to learn. And so that would be my thoughts.
Yep, 100%. And that is, I think that's the hard part, because when you just hear, like, to me, it sounds funny. Summer and I talk about this a lot because she's always like, you're a master at delegation. For me, it seems like putting on my shoes. Delegation just makes sense for me, but I can understand why it's hard for people. It's because it's exactly what you were just talking about, Debbie, that you've got to live through the process, and there are going to be picking up pieces and going, okay, you totally did not understand what I meant by that. Okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's start back from zero again. And that takes extra work and patience, and it took longer than you were expecting. And I think that's where people lose that motivation to continue moving towards the process of delegating out, and they take it back and say, oh, I'll just forget it, I'll just do it. But then, like I said, if the goal in mind is for you to ultimately not have that on your plate, then you've got to stick to the process. Like you said, you've got to keep moving forward with it.
One thing, I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but yes, Summer, I've got a lot of experience, almost 40 years in this crazy industry. I think the one thing my husband always told me, and it stuck with me past his, it's been gone almost 5 years, is you need to have clear, concise communications with people, and I think also with your employees or volunteers or whomever you're leading. But at the end of the day, when somebody asked me, as I'm looking towards retirement in a couple of years, what would you want your legacy? My legacy is leaders that I've helped guide their pathway. If I can make an influence on someone I may not ever know, but that's what it's all about, especially as females. We're in 2023 and we still fight. The chamber industry is typically females on the lower side and males on the higher side of salary ranges. And I've always worked real heavily to educate that. But I think in the whole world of delegation, you've got to be very very respectful of the impact you're playing on other people. And, you know, if I can touch one life, then it's worth it. And yes, it takes work, but it's also very rewarding at the end of the day.
I agree with you. And what I was going to say, and you are not dominating the conversation. Like I said, we are happy to have you this morning. One of the things that I have had to work on, and I don't know if it's just in maturity, in life, in motherhood, and career, and whatever. I am not an overly patient person. Actually, we joke, my husband and I, that his patience is my virtue, because it's like we are yin and yang when it comes to that. And so one of the things that I have tried to work on is practicing patience. And I call it a practice because it is not, I don't know if you ever master it. I'm not a monk. But one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older is, because I would, in my younger years, career-wise, you know, when I was 28 and I had 150 employees that I was overseeing, you know, you think that you know everything. And so I was like, I don't understand why they can't get it faster, or why they don't do this, you know, and a lot of them were older than me and everything. Taking that breath and that step back and allowing grace and just saying, okay, where do we need to go back and do this again so that I can help you understand it? Because we can't expect everyone to work at the same speed or level or whatever. If, you know, most people are coachable if they're willing to learn. And I think that that's been something that I've really had to practice myself, is not having my expectation of you should already know this. That's pretty condescending and arrogant of me. So taking the time to say, you know, where can I help? Especially if the person is receptive. If they're not willing to learn, then obviously you're kind of wasting your time. You're going to have to move on. But if it's just taking a little bit longer to perfect the process, allowing that grace time and giving the time needed so that they can master it.
Yeah, no, and I think you made a very good point. They should know this. I hear that so often from supervisors, that they're just like, well, I saw their experience and where they worked before. They should know how to do this. And I'm like, but we're a different organization. The job is different. The job description, the expectation, our culture is different. We should not assume that they should just know how to do this. Now, after we teach them and train them, and then they still don't know how to do it, then we have something different to talk about. But if we have never given our expectation, our training, our guidance, our mentorship of how we expect it to happen, we should not have that expectation. And that is that they should just know how to do it. And I'm like, it's kind of the whole, we want somebody with experience, but then we're not willing to give somebody a job. Well, how do I get experience if I can't get a job? I mean, it's the same idea. Like, how do you expect me to know it if you've never taught it to me? It's that idea also.
So Sylvia, those points are right on. I think too, one thing in my world, there is a skill set you train when you manage employees. There's also a skill set you learn when you train and delegate volunteers. And many of you, as I know most of you on here, you have children, you're bouncing all the balls. You know, Stacy might as well have a bus going all the time with her kids, and Summer too. So I think there's a difference in how we handle delegation. I found in my career, particularly with my volunteer world, is getting to know them and figure out. So we talk about in school, we want the teachers to know how our children learn, and we talk about critical thinking skills, but somehow once they get to the workplace, we don't take the time to know how that IE volunteer or employee learns. How do they navigate that learning curve? We just kind of say, you can't get it. So I think as employers, as leaders, as managers, however you want to put it, as mentors, we need to take the time to get to know whom we're leading, and how are they functioning? Because I have 3 employees. So it's a small thing. I've always had small but very intimate relationships. I have 3 very different thinkers. And so how I address that, how I train them, how I work, because I've got to know them. And I think that is a real key sometimes, because there's such a fine line there, particularly with, Sylvia, you referred a lot to your employees. There's such a fine line there. But I asked a business one time, because they said, I really want someone with critical skills. And I said, okay, how do you test your current employees about how they use critical skills? And they had this deer in the headlight look. So sometimes you demand more from a future employee than spending the time and investment to get to know and grow an existing employee. And that works in my world of volunteers too.
Very true. And you are correct on supervising. I don't think I supervise one person that I supervise the same. I think I supervise each of them different, because they're all very different.
That's right.
Their motivation is different, and their learning style is different, and their passion is different for different projects. So yeah, definitely it is. As a leader, you have to know who you're leading, and then they have to know you. Like, I'm always a big person to let people know no news is good news. Whereas some people think she must not like me because she never talks to me. I'm like, no, you don't understand. If I'm not talking to you, it's because I know you're moving at a pace and it's working, and I'm not going to mess up your pace. But if you need me to come and talk to you, then tell me that, and then I'll come and I'll do the check-in. And so it is just having those conversations and knowing each other.
To what Miss Debbie said, because going from a large corporation to now working with a very small team after working alone-ish. I think it's also important, especially when you're collaborating on something, when we go back to this creative delegation, when you don't have, if you weren't hired to do something in particular, or you're collaborating to make something else. I think it's important, especially for smaller practices and such. And Selma, I was thinking about you guys. Obviously, you guys have specific roles based on education and experience and all that. But also, you can even go as far as, if you're a small group, what do you like to do and what do you dislike to do? Or what are your strengths and weaknesses? The reason the four of us were able to come together like we did is because we each brought something different to the table that the other one didn't like to do. So we complemented each other very well. And so, and I think that, you don't have to always have this, depending on the environment in the industry, you don't have to have this rigid job description. This is what you do. These are your expectations, this and this and this. You can do the parts that you like, but also as you create more opportunity for other people, as you grow to the next level, and it's time to bring people on, maybe that's when you get a little bit more, honed in on what the roles are and how to create those expectations as you're delegating out certain tasks.
In my small world.
Was that useful?
Well, I think you're right on. And so I have a small, very active, you all know how busy we are. So I have to have a team that's flexible. I have to have, I train everybody. We work together on some projects because I want everyone to be prepared to answer a question or to lead that. So we don't have quite that lanes that some of you have. Like Sylvia has, the crew, she's got that line of training that's very definitely, that's where it needs to go. My team has to be totally flexible, and it's hard, especially when you're training a new one. And Taylor's been with me almost a year now. And it's like every day he says, now how to do this and how to do that. And he's a inquisitive person, but it's taken time. So I think that's important when you have a small group, particularly when you're service driven, just like you guys are with the association. You got to flip, and you got to know, and one's got to cover the other, and that's important. But so is that, Sylvia, with your management team. How that team has to be ready to support you. And so when you think of that, and Michelle's on here and at Hardeen, and so I just, she's getting ready to come into our leadership program. I'm really excited for her. But you've got to be flexible and be able to flip. But that management team, Sylvia, you all who have management teams, it's very critical to the success of you and the team. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I just wrote a whole novel, but I have to jump off. Sylvia, I'm gonna do, I feel like if I hit end and leave, it says assign someone else as host, and I'm gonna do that for you.
Okay.
Leave meeting. There we go. Look at me. 4 years of Zoom finally paying off. Okay, bye guys.
Bye.
So Sylvia, I do have a question for you because you mentioned a key word, and Stacy can tell you, and you all who have heard me, I really believe in finding your passion. And I always, in my career found me. So what advice do you give people in how to find the people with the passion that matches your passion or could follow or that, or how do you create that or share that passion? Because among your, especially your leadership team.
So for us specifically, if I was thinking of Tresco, I think our passion has to connect to our mission, because we're only going to be successful at Tresco if everybody understands that we're working towards one mission. Now, how we get there, we can all be creative and we can all have different jobs that get us there. But essentially, if the main driving point isn't our mission, that we are here to help people with disabilities in our community, then they're not going to have the passion for the work. I mean, so the mission has to be somewhere in there for them, but definitely to make the connection of my passion with their passion. I think, you mentioned earlier with your small group, and everybody kind of has to be flexible and know each other and know the different jobs. I think the big thing is I'm a person that I've always heard A people hire A people and B people hire B people. I'm actually the opposite. I'm always looking for my shortcomings or something that I feel that's a strength area that I don't have. Like, I want that person to work for me. I don't want somebody that's just like me. I think I'd be a terrible employee personally, but I want somebody that's going to bring something new and different to our group that we don't already have. So I actually do like the fact that we have different people with different aspects and different experiences that are going to come together, because we're all a piece of the puzzle. And then that puzzle is going to be complete with all of us. Like, we can't all be the same. We've got to be different. And our differences is what's going to make us even better. So that's always what I look for. I'm always looking for the differences. But yeah, as far as the passion and how for us, we have a mission that's in place. And so that's what needs to move us in that direction. And so if people come on board and realize this isn't my passion, working with people with disabilities, that's okay. We're not the place for you then. But if that is, then you're going to be very, very successful at Tresco.
Just curious, how many on here are their own business owner, or you do work for a bigger company?
I am my own business owner. I'm kind of a double whammy because I myself am a realtor, so I'm like a solopreneur. I'm by myself, but then my husband and I also own a restaurant, and so we have employees there. So it's kind of it depends on what role I'm filling as to whether I have folks to be responsible for.
So I've noticed, I've watched Sylvia, of course, Stacy, I've watched you. So I think you bring up a really good point in that my personal passion and loves and out there in the community could be different, quote unquote, of my job, but they complement each other. So sometimes our passions complement each other. You never want them to really compete with each other, but you want to have your own. I think you mentioned it in the very beginning, Sylvia, about, finding you, never forget about you. But I think the passions complement each other, and watching you all kind of from afar, just kind of find your way. And so that is what we talk about, delegation a lot, but it's also a mentoring thing. I've seen through my career I still get calls from people that young adults in Rio Rancho and Hobbs, my career path, and they call me every once in a while and say thank you, and that's what it's all about. But it's sort of this combination of, Sylvia, you're not just impacting in the workplace, you're impacting people for life. And that is something I think I've learned in my career path. And I think of Brandy Misquez, who now is on our dean board. And I think when I was hired and I had this person at the end of the table that I saw when I started talking about her, and it was like this light bulb went off and she connected the dots. So I think for us as women leaders, again, and as business owners or however you work, is that we're impacting people for life. And Sylvia, you all are impacting so many lives. And so I think that when you talk about passion, I think it gets down to the difference we're making in people's lives, both in work and in personal.
Any other questions or comments or tips or tricks to share about delegation?
I do have a question after Salma. Go ahead, Salma.
Just from an employee standpoint, in the past, and even I see it in my friends who are business owners. I know it's very hard to delegate for some people, but just definitely be patient with them, give them feedback in a just professional, like nice way. In the past, I've gotten feedback that was not the best way that could have been handled, and that just doesn't help anyone in that case. So yeah, just definitely remember it takes time for someone to do it the way that you'd like to do, but at the end of the day, no one's going to put in as much effort and time and sweat as yourself as a business owner. So just be patient, give feedback, and just, yeah, if there's just things that you don't like, just make sure, just tell them nicely. So there's no, I guess, in my experience, there's no need to cause issues between two parties. That just doesn't solve anything for anyone. But that's just my experience as an employee.
Well, thank you.
I just have a question, Sylvia. As a leader, how do you delegate to staff? Like you said, all of our staff is very different, and it's a great thing to our company. But how do you delegate, I guess, equally or fairly to staff members, being that they're different and some may take, either longer or take a different route on doing certain tasks versus others that can do it, not more efficiently, but quickly?
You have to be really, really careful with that. And we have all fallen victim of that as leaders, because I know I have in my years of different jobs that I've had and positions and people that I've worked with. You don't want to overwhelm the people that are really, really great and really, really just get it and are able to hit the ground running. Because what you do is then it's almost like a punishment. Like, because I'm good at my job, I end up getting more, and the people that suck or are slower or take longer get less. Like, well, what the hell? Like, that's not fair. So you really have to be careful with that. And we can all fall victim of that. I mean, one example that I can think of is when I was the director of children's services, we used to send our family service coordinators out to do presentations about what services we provided to different referral sources to then hopefully get them to refer families to our agency. And you knew your handful of people that were really, really good at it and had the personality for it. And the presentation, they had it nailed. They had the elevator speech. And so those were the ones that you wanted to use over and over and over again. And it took a supervisor to tell me, because he was like, okay, I'm going to send so-and-so to go do this presentation. And I was like, ooh, are you sure so-and-so is not available? And he was like, okay, wait, that's not fair. If we're not gonna send her, why do we have her? And then that really made me be reflective and be like, okay, we've missed the mark here. Like, if she's not presenting the way I want her to, or she's not she doesn't have the elevator speech down, or she doesn't know what then we need to train her, we need to mentor her, we need to give her that guidance. Because if we're just throwing it to the people that are good at it all the time, yes, for some people that motivates people. Like, I'm a person that I'm like, yeah, you gave me something more, bring it on, I can help you. But other people don't get motivated that way. It's actually the opposite, that they just feel like, okay, because I'm good at my job, I keep getting stuff thrown at me. I need to start showing that I'm not good at my job. And that we don't want that. That's counterintuitive to what we want. So it's definitely finding that balance. Like you were saying, like, okay, if I've just given Sylvia 2 tasks, then it's really time for me to give Mary a task. Like, I can't give Sylvia the 3rd task, even though I know Sylvia will probably do it really, really well and really, really quick. It's like, I've got to take the time and the effort and get through the process with Mary if this is a task that I really need her to get done. And so it's working through that mentorship, that guidance, continuing to, train and move forward, because it can burn out the people that are really good at and just grab stuff and take it and run with it.
Awesome, thank you.
So with that same, what Felicity is saying, I think though, everybody has different strengths. So say Selma is really good at something and I fall short on something. So why on the flip side of that, why is it not okay to just say, okay, well, if she's good at that presentation and going and speaking, but I'm not, so let's switch our tasks. Maybe there's a task that she does and I'm not, as long as the individuals are willing to make that switch to say like, yeah, I know, I really like that and I'm good at that and I'm not so great at this, but she is, like, so let's switch that. I see what you're saying, like, bring somebody up to that level that you want them to be in, or
Yeah.
teach them, especially in case like she's not available and so we're in a bind and you need to do it. Yes. But if this person signs at that, by all means, I think you should let them, as long as they're not feeling overwhelmed, but say like, you know what, I'm going to switch you out. Like, you're good at this, I'm good at that. Let's flop,
Correct. And I think the switching, but it's when we forget to switch, and Sylvia now has gotten delegated 4 tasks and Mary has gotten delegated 1. It's that's where I'm saying finding that balance. But yeah, if Mary's like, I hate to speak, and Sylvia's like, I love it. It's like, okay, I'll take your compliance stuff and your data entry stuff, and then you go speak. I mean, yes, if there's that opportunity to find out where people are going to have strengths and weaknesses, and they want to say, oh no, I'd much rather do that, and I'll do that any day of the week. That's definitely a way to approach it. And that's a way to look at it when you're looking at a team of people and deciding who you're going to delegate what to. My big point was just like, don't fall into the trap that you're always giving the person that always hits the ground running the task, because then you're overloading them. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so it is actually 10:01. Are there any topics or things for us to think about for next month that people would like to discuss on this Zoom? If you guys think of anything, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or the association. I'll also put it out on our social media as we get closer to next month's CEO Zoom. But yeah, if there is something, I think some of the ideas that we thought about were constructive criticism for future conversations, performance evaluations for future conversations. There was another one. Oh, when employees ask for more money. I think that was another conversation topic. So if any of those sound good and you're interested in those, you guys can definitely let me know. Let Summer know, but I'll also shoot it out on social media as well for topic ideas. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Sylvia.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.